The Nameless came out of the dark like a nightmare given flesh. It moved on all fours at first, its limbs bent the wrong way, claws sparking against stone as it rushed us. When it rose, its spine cracked upright, head splitting wider than any jaw should. The sound it made wasn't a roar. It was a wet hum that rattled my teeth and pressed into the base of my skull. "Left side!" David Kane shouted, silver blade in hand. Julian Voss was faster. He dropped to one knee, chalk scraping across the ground. A circle of salt ignited, hissing, bright white. The creature slammed into it like a wall, shrieking as its skin peeled away in strips. Sam Hayes cursed under his breath. "Jesus Christ! Don't pray," I snapped, the axe already in my grip. The thing thrashed against the barrier, long arms clawing for us. David slashed, steel biting through bone, black ichor spraying the wall. The Nameless shrieked louder, twisting half in, half out of the circle like reality itself. Didn't know if it wanted the monster here. "Marcus!" I charged. The axe hummed, runes along its head glowing faint blue. I swung with both hands, the blade biting deep into its chest. For a heartbeat, its body shuddered, stretched impossibly thin, then exploded into smoke and ash. Silence. I staggered back, breath burning, arms shaking from the strike. The salt circle fizzled, leaving only scorched stone. The cathedral reeked of sulfur and rot. Sam let out a laugh that was more hysteria than humor. "Clean kill, no veil broken. Father Torres will be proud." None of us laughed with him. Because the truth is, every time we kill one of those things, it feels less like victory, and more like we've just taken another step into someone else's nightmare. My name is Marcus Hale. I'm part of the Vatican's Extermination Unit. We're not priests. We're not soldiers. We're orphans, stolen young, remade into weapons, trained to kill what the rest of the world doesn't even believe exists. And the first thing we're taught isn't how to fight. It isn't scripture. It isn't faith. It's the rules. There are 5. Only 5. They're repeated to us every night like prayers, beaten into memory until they're carved into our bones. Father Gabriel Torres made sure of that. His voice still haunts me when I close my eyes. Rule 1. Never pray out loud after midnight. If you hear voices, they are not God's. Rule 2. Do not bleed on holy ground. If you are wounded, step outside before you fall. Rule 3. When the bells ring, cover your ears. Never count the tolls. Rule 4. Relics answer to no one. If one moves on its own, leave it. Rule 5. Remember, you are already dead. Every breath you take is borrowed time in service to God. I've watched brothers die for breaking them. I've seen the rules kill as mercilessly as any demon. They say the rules keep us alive. Everyone believes that. Father Torres, the Vatican, even my team. But standing there in the ruins, the ash of the Nameless, still hot on the ground, I couldn't shake the thought gnawing at the back of my mind. Were the rules truly protecting us, or protecting something else from us? Back in the underground dormitories, the mission felt like it had never happened. The Vatican has a way of swallowing things whole. Cathedrals reduced to rubble, monsters turned to ash, even fear itself. All of it vanishes behind the walls and rules. But the faces of my brothers never vanished. David Kane sat across from me at the long steel table, blade in hand, polishing it until the metal gleamed. He was always like that, rigid, disciplined, unshakable. David believed in the rules the way priests believed in Scripture. To him, the rules were God's mouth-made law. He'd repeat them under his breath during training, like he was daring the world to try and break him. Julian Voss, on the other hand, was quiet. Not shy. Quiet. He had this way of watching everything with those sharp eyes of his, calculating angles and outcomes like he was playing a game only he understood. When he spoke, it was never more than a few words, but they always hit harder than David's sermons. And then there was Sam Hayes. Sam couldn't shut up if his life depended on it. Jokes, puns, nicknames, anything to fill the silence. He claimed laughter made the fear shrink, but I knew better. He was the most terrified of us all, and humor was his armor. Still, we needed him. In the middle of hell, a bad joke was sometimes the only thing that kept us moving forward. We were orphans, molded into killers, but somehow, despite the Vatican's best efforts to strip us down into tools, we were still brothers. That night, in the mess hall, Sam leaned across the table, a grin tugging at his lips. "Hey, Marcus," he whispered, glancing around to make sure Father Torres wasn't near. "What happens if I pray after midnight? Do I get a late fee?" Julian looked up from his book with that cold, analytical stare. David slammed his knife into the table, blade quivering in the wood. "Don't joke about the rules," Sam chuckled, though it came out hollow. "Come on, it's just words. Half the time they don't even make sense. No praying after midnight? What's that supposed to mean?" My gut clenched. Before I could answer, a shadow fell over us. Father Gabriel Torres loomed, his cassock brushing the floor, his face carved from stone, his eyes, cold and merciless, fixed on Sam. "Stand," he ordered. Sam froze. His grin slipped away. He stood, knuckles white against the table. "Recite Rule 1. Sam's throat bobbed. "Never pray out loud after midnight. If you hear voices, they are not gods. Do you know why it exists?" Sam hesitated. "Because the thing's in the dark." The slap cracked across the hall. Sam stumbled, lip split, blood dripping onto the stone floor. "Because it has been broken before," Torres said, voice low, dangerous, "and I buried the bodies myself." Silence blanketed the room. Even David looked away. Torres leaned closer, his whisper sharp enough to cut. "The rules are not for your amusement. They are not a game. Mock them again, Hayes, and I will see you pray after midnight, alone." He turned, robes sweeping the floor, and disappeared into the shadows. Sam wiped the blood from his mouth and forced a laugh, but it trembled. "Guess I'll keep my prayers to myself, huh?" No one laughed with him. That night, lying in the dormitory, I couldn't sleep. Torres's words echoed in my head. Because it has been broken before, and I buried the bodies myself. I rolled onto my side, staring at the ceiling. The rules weren't just commandments. They were graves, each one carved out of someone else's death. I tried to imagine what happened when Rule 1 was broken. What voices whispered to those who prayed after midnight? What pulled them under so far that not even Father Torres could save them? Sam thought it was a joke. David thought it was holy law. Julian thought it was strategy. And me? I thought it was a warning. But a warning of what, exactly? I still didn't know. The order came at dusk. Another abandoned church. Another whisper of something stirring where silence should reign. This time, it was in Turin, a cathedral left hollow after decades of decay. Its steeple cracked, its bells long since rusted still. At least, that's what the reports claimed. We moved through the city under cover of night, black robes pulled tight, weapons hidden in plain sight. To the world, we were just another cluster of priests, too small to matter, too quiet to notice. But beneath the robes lay silver blades, chalk, salt, and the axe strapped to my back. Sam muttered as we passed shuttered windows and dark alleys. "Turin pizza better be worth this, I'm starving." "Shut it," David growled. Julian's eyes swept the rooftops, his silence heavier than David's bark. I walked in the center, palms damp despite the cool air. The city felt wrong, like the streets themselves were holding their breath. We reached the cathedral just past midnight. The doors sagged on their hinges, their wood swollen with mold. Inside, the air smelled of dust and mildew, and the silence was so deep it seemed to press against my ears. David motioned forward. "Formation." We split, moving down the nave, flashlights sweeping across pews long since cracked and broken. Rats scattered. The air grew colder the deeper we went. Then, faintly, a sound. A metallic groan from above. My stomach dropped. The bells. One deep toll rang out, so loud it shook the rafters and rattled my teeth. David's voice snapped like a whip. Ears! We all clamped our hands against our heads. The second toll followed, reverberating in my skull. The stone under my boots vibrated. Sam cursed beside me, his lips moving, but I couldn't hear the words. I squeezed my eyes shut, pressed harder against my ears, refusing to listen. Because Rule 3 wasn't a suggestion. When the bells ring, cover your ears. Never count the tolls. I tried not to count. God, I tried. 1, 2. A third toll boomed, deeper, darker. My mind clawed at the numbers, even as I fought to push them away. 3. The sound dug into my bones, scraping along my spine. And then I heard something else. A voice, layered inside the toll, whispering. Not Italian, not Latin, older, cruel. 4. No, I wasn't supposed to count. I jammed my palms harder against my ears, teeth grinding, every nerve screaming with the effort not to listen. 5. Someone cried out. I risked a glance. Brother Alonzo, a boy a year younger than me, a recruit added to our squad just weeks ago, wasn't covering his ears. His eyes were wide, locked on the bell tower above. His lips moved, counting each toll, whispering the numbers with reverence as if each one was a prayer. Alonzo! I shouted, but he didn't hear. 6. His nose began to bleed. 7. Blood poured from his ears. His lips kept moving, whispering the numbers, faster now, desperate. 8. His eyes rolled back, but still he counted, blood running down his chin. 9. His body convulsed, bones snapping audibly under the weight of the sound. 10. The toll cut off. The silence that followed was worse. Alonzo collapsed, his body twisted, jaw locked in a final word that never came. Sam stared, pale and trembling. Holy hell! David's jaw was set, his hands still pressed tight to his head. Slowly, he lowered them, glaring at the broken body on the floor. He disobeyed the rule. Julian didn't say a word. His gaze lingered on Alonzo, then flicked to me, as if daring me to question it. But I didn't need to question. I had just seen Rule 3 claim its price. David stepped forward, kneeling beside the corpse. He muttered a quick prayer, then closed Alonzo's eyes. We burn him. Before dawn. Sam's voice cracked. He was just a kid. David stood, his expression carved from stone. So are we. We carried Alonzo's body outside, laying him in the overgrown courtyard. Julian drew a circle of salt while I soaked the kindling with oil. The flames roared to life quickly, orange light licking the night sky. As the fire consumed him, I stared at the dark outline of the bell tower. No ropes had moved, no wind had blown. The bells had rung on their own. And if the bells could still ring after decades of silence, what else inside this cathedral was awake? Sam whispered beside me, his face lit by the fire. Why the hell do these rules even exist, Marcus? I didn't answer, because deep down I already knew. The rules weren't protecting us. They were warning us. The fire from Alonzo's pyre still clung to my clothes as we pushed deeper into the cathedral. His death hung over us like smoke, thick, suffocating, impossible to shake. No one spoke, not Sam, not even David. Julian led now, salt pouch at his belt, flashlight beam cutting through the dark. His silence was different than usual, heavier, like the bells had carved something out of him too. The nave narrowed into a side chapel, its floor warped and buckled. Statues of saints leaned forward as if they were listening. Candles, long since melted, lay in wax puddles along the altar, though no flame had touched them in decades. That's when the whisper came. Not a voice exactly, more like air scraping against stone. My skin prickled. The nameless didn't wait this time. It dropped from the rafters, a hulking shadow that slammed into Julian and dragged him across the cracked tiles. His scream cut through the silence, sharp and raw. "Salt!" David barked. Julian's hands fumbled at his pouch even as claws raked across his chest. I charged, axe in hand, swinging hard. The blade caught the creature's side, sparks of blue light hissing from the runes. It shrieked and staggered back, smoke pouring from the wound. Sam yanked Julian to his feet, blood spilling through his torn shirt. Too much blood. Then my stomach turned cold. Drops of red pattered onto the chapel floor, onto holy ground. Rule 2, do not bleed on holy ground. If you are wounded, step outside before you fall. But Julian couldn't move fast enough. The blood seeped into the cracks of the tiles, and the ground began to hum. A low vibration rose beneath our boots, rattling the stone. The statues of saints shuddered, their stone eyes weeping dust. Julian gasped, his face pale. I can't. The floor split beneath him. A fissure opened wide, glowing red, and from it came the sound of thousands of hands clawing at the surface. I saw them, dark, skeletal fingers pushing through the crack, reaching for him, for us. "Get him out!" I roared. Sam wrapped an arm around Julian's shoulders, dragging him toward the door. David and I swung steel and salt at the hands that clawed higher, trying to drag Julian down into the fissure. Each strike only slowed them, never stopped them. The whispering grew louder, layered voices overlapping, all chanting one word I didn't understand. The crack widened, stone breaking apart like paper. Julian's boot slipped. One hand shot up from the fissure. Skeletal fingers wrapping his ankle. His scream echoed through the chapel. I dove forward, axe cleaving through the arm. Black dust exploded, but more hands reached, desperate. David hauled Julian's other arm, Sam pulling from the front. Together, we dragged him across the threshold, out into the courtyard. The second his body cleared the chapel doors, the fissure slammed shut with a deafening crack. Silence returned, thick and absolute. Julian lay on the ground, chest heaving, blood still pouring from the gashes across his torso. His skin was pale, almost translucent, his veins darkening like ink spreading through water. I knelt beside him, pressing a rag to the wounds. "Stay with us." His eyes fluttered, unfocused. They called my name. I froze. "What did you hear?" Julian coughed, blood flecking his lips. Not voices, chains, breaking. Sam's face was ashen. "We need to get him back, now." David's jaw clenched. "If he bleeds here, the fissures will open again. We move him out of consecrated ground." We carried him across the courtyard, down the broken steps, until the cathedral loomed above us like a carcass. Only then did the tremors stop. Julian's breathing slowed, shallow and ragged. His skin was cold to the touch. Sam knelt beside him, voice shaking. "Why the hell would bleeding matter? Why does it open that?" David's answer was sharp, almost a growl. "Because the rules aren't lies. They're the only reason we're not already dead." But I wasn't so sure. Julian had heard something. Chains, breaking, and the thought wouldn't leave me. Maybe the rules weren't keeping us alive at all. Maybe they were keeping something else locked in. Julian survived the night, but barely. We patched him as best we could, bandages wrapped tight, his skin clammy under our hands. He didn't speak much after that. He just stared at the ceiling of the dormitory, lips moving silently as though repeating something only he could hear. Father Torres didn't waste time with comfort. By morning, he was already assigning us our next task. "This one requires discipline," he said, his gaze cold and sharp. "You will guard a relic. You will not question it. You will not touch it. You will obey the rule." Rule 4. Relics answer to no one. If one moves on its own, leave it. I'd heard the warnings before, but never seen them tested. Relics were supposed to be holy objects, fragments of saints, crucifixes, chalices, treasures of the church. But every whispered story I'd caught in the barracks told me something else, that the relics weren't holy at all, that they were alive. The crucifix we were tasked with guarding rested in a sealed chamber beneath the Vatican itself. The walls were lined with candles, their flames guttering though no draft stirred the air. The cross stood on a stone pedestal in the center, silver so polished it gleamed like water. We stood watch in silence. Hours passed. The room was too still, the air too heavy. Sam shifted, whispering, "It's just a hunk of metal. Why guard it?" David shot him a glare. "Because the rule says so." Julian said nothing, but I caught his eyes, dark, hollow, watching the crucifix as if waiting for it to breathe. And then it did. The cross tilted, slowly, deliberately. It scraped against the pedestal, grinding metal on stone until it turned 90 degrees. The candles flickered, bending toward it as though drawn. My throat went dry. "Leave it," I whispered. Sam's face had gone pale. That wasn't wind. That wasn't... David stepped forward. His jaw was set, his eyes burning with that same blind faith that had always carried him. "The relics belong to the church. They answer to God through us." "David," I started, but it was too late. He reached out and touched it. The crucifix screamed. Not a sound of metal, not the groan of stone. A scream, human, piercing, filled with agony. The room shook. The candles burst into streams of wax, and David was hurled backward as if struck by lightning. His skin blistered instantly, red welts rising along his arm where his hand had touched the silver. The cross shuddered on its pedestal, tilting again, and for a moment, just a moment, I saw something behind it. Not a shadow, not light. Something caught between the two, a face maybe. Eyes, hollow and endless, staring back at me through the gleam of the silver. Then it was gone. David writhed on the ground, his breath coming in ragged gasps. His hand was blackened, skin split, as though the relic had branded him. "Help him!" Sam shouted. I pulled David back away from the pedestal. He convulsed once more, then stilled, his eyes wide and wet. It spoke. Julian leaned closer, his voice a whisper. "What did it say?" David's lips trembled. "Chains. Always chains." The crucifix was still again, resting on the pedestal, as though it had never moved. The candles burned steady. The silence returned. But it wasn't real silence, not to me. I could still hear something faint, threading through the air like a song half-remembered, a whisper curling out of the silver, brushing against my ear, too soft to understand, but heavy enough to crush the air from my chest. I wanted to run. I wanted to shatter the cross to pieces and bury them deep, but Father Torres appeared in the doorway, his presence filling the chamber like ice water. His eyes scanned David's burns, the crucifix, the room still trembling faintly from what had just happened. "You disobeyed Rule 4, he said flatly. David opened his mouth, but Torres raised a hand, silencing him. "This was mercy. Next time, it will be death." He turned his gaze on all of us, lingering on me last. "The rules are the only thing keeping you alive. Forget that, and you join the bodies beneath these stones." He left us there, in the suffocating dark, with the crucifix gleaming, silent, and waiting. Sam broke the silence with a whisper, barely audible. "What the hell are we guarding? Holy relics don't scream." No one answered, because deep down I already knew the truth. Relics weren't holy, they were prisons. The relic chamber left us shaken. David's hand was a ruin, blistered and black, though he refused to cry out even as Sam bound it in strips of cloth. He kept muttering under his breath, half prayers, half curses, as if he couldn't decide whether to hate the relic or worship it. Father Torres gave us no reprieve. By nightfall, we were back in the dormitory. the crucifix locked away again behind iron doors and whispered secrets. The dormitory was a low stone hall lined with cots. Cold seeped up through the floor, and the air smelled of mildew and old sweat. Normally, exhaustion made sleep easy. But that night, none of us rested. Sam tossed on his bunk, muttering about screaming silver and holy bullshit. David sat against the wall, eyes closed, lips moving in silent repetition of the rules. Julian lay still, too still. His bandages were spotted with dried blood, his skin pale, but his eyes stared upward, unblinking. I tried to close mine, but sometime after midnight, a sound pulled me awake, a whisper, low, rhythmic, prayers. I rolled onto my side. Julian wasn't in his cot. The whispers drew me toward the chapel at the far end of the dormitory hall. Its door stood ajar, a sliver of candlelight leaking through. I pushed it open. Julian was kneeling at the altar, hands clasped tight, lips moving. His voice was louder now, carrying in the empty space. Pater Noster, Kias in Caelus. The Lord's Prayer. Spoken after midnight. Rule 1. Never pray out loud after midnight. If you hear voices, they are not God's. My throat went dry. Julian, I hissed, stop. He didn't look at me. His voice grew louder, faster, words tripping over each other. Sanctificetur nomen tuum. Julian, I stepped closer, boots echoing on stone. Then he stopped. The silence was heavier than the words had been. Slowly he lifted his head. His eyes weren't his. They glowed faintly, like dying embers. His lips curved into a smile that didn't belong to him. He hears us now, Julian whispered. The candlelight flickered, stretching shadows across the walls. The air thickened, pressing down on me until I could barely breathe. What did you say? I forced out. Julian's head tilted, unnatural, like a puppet string had been pulled too far. You don't need the rules anymore, Marcus, not when he is awake. My chest tightened. Julian, listen to me. This isn't you. You have to. He cut me off with a laugh, low, broken, a sound that made my stomach twist. They were never yours. They were his, every rule, every chain. The candle blew out. Darkness swallowed the chapel. In that black silence, Julian screamed. His voice tore through the room, a raw sound of pain and ecstasy twisted together. I lunged forward, catching him as his body convulsed. His skin was cold, his veins dark beneath it, his mouth frothing red. His eyes rolled back and he whispered one last time, chains, breaking. Then his body went still. I held him there, my hands trembling, the weight of him suddenly too heavy. Footsteps thundered behind me. David burst through the door, Sam at his heels. What happened? Sam's voice cracked, panic flooding it. I couldn't answer. David knelt, pressing 2 fingers to Julian's throat. Nothing. He clenched his jaw, his face hard as stone. He broke Rule 1. Sam's eyes darted between us, wide and wet. No, he wouldn't. He wouldn't be that stupid. David stood, his shadow long against the wall. The rules are life. Break them, and you choose death. He turned and walked out, leaving me kneeling beside Julian's body. Sam collapsed to the floor, head in his hands. Jesus Christ, we're just kids. I stared at Julian's still face, his lips parted, as if about to speak again. But I already knew what his last words meant. Chains breaking. And whatever was bound by those chains, it was listening. Julian's body was gone by morning. No words, no ceremony, just vanished, as though the Vatican itself had swallowed him whole. When I asked Father Torres what happened, he gave me the same answer he always gave. Obey the rules, Hale. That is all that matters. But I couldn't shake Julian's last words. Chains breaking. The whisper had followed me into sleep, curling in my dreams like smoke, until I woke with sweat cold on my skin. That night, while Sam slept restlessly, and David sat rigid with his bandaged hand, I slipped out. The Vatican's underground halls were endless, twisting corridors of stone lit by weak bulbs that buzzed like insects. I kept to the shadows, footsteps soft, moving toward the council chamber. I'd seen enough missions to know where Torres disappeared when he left us. Voices carried before I reached the door, deep measured tones. One of them I knew instantly, Torres. The other was colder, older, dripping with authority. Cardinal Silvano Bianchi. I pressed myself against the wall, listening. They are unraveling, Torres was saying. The boys are questioning. Hayes barely hides his fear. Hale watches me with suspicion. If they continue, they won't, Bianchi interrupted. His voice cut like glass. The rules are enough. They always have been. They are not for the children to understand. They are chains, nothing more. My breath caught. Torres hesitated. Chains? For what, Eminence? A pause. Then the cardinal's voice lowered to a whisper that crawled under my skin. For him. For Malachi. The name twisted in the air, heavy, wrong. Torres spoke again, his tone strained. The recruits, they believe the rules protect them, that they are God's law. Bianchi chuckled, low and humorless. Let them believe. The truth would shatter them. The rules were never made for their survival. They were carved in blood to keep the prison shut. Every boy who breaks one feeds the lock with his death. Every corpse strengthens the seal. I gripped the stone wall until my nails split. Julian, Alonzo, all of them. Their deaths hadn't been punishment. They had been payment. Torres's voice trembled, just barely, but I heard it. And if the chains fail? For the first time, Bianchi's mask slipped. His voice grew sharp, frantic beneath the cold. Then he returns, and when he does, there will be no God left to pray to. Silence. The weight of those words pressed down like a stone altar. Torres cleared his throat. The unit won't last much longer. Hale is already dangerous. He asks questions. Then break him, Bianchi said, or bury him. The rules are not to be questioned. They are to be obeyed until the last breath leaves their bodies. Footsteps scraped against stone. I slipped back into the shadows as the door creaked open. Torres emerged, his face pale in the dim light. His eyes swept the hall, cold and searching. For a moment, I thought he saw me. His gaze lingered, narrowed. Then he turned and walked the other way, his robes whispering against the floor. I stayed frozen in the dark long after he was gone, heart hammering. Malachi. The name echoed in my head like the toll of the bells. The rules weren't ours. They never had been. They were his. And every death we'd witnessed was nothing but mortar in the prison walls of something far worse than the nameless. When I returned to the dormitory, Sam stirred awake. His eyes were hollow, rimmed with red. "Where'd you go?" he whispered. "Nowhere," I lied. But when I lay back on my cot, staring into the stone ceiling above, I felt the truth pressing against me, heavier than chains. The rules didn't keep us alive. They kept him asleep. And he was already stirring. Sleep had become impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Julian kneeling at that altar, his voice not his own. I heard Alonzo counting the tolls, his bones snapping under invisible weight. I saw David's burned hand shaking as he whispered fragments of chains. The rules were supposed to protect us, but all I could see were graves. That night, I woke to the sound of frantic whispering. Sam. I pushed myself up, the dormitory dark except for the glow of a single candle by his bunk. He was hunched over his field manual, the one every recruit carried, pages worn thin from constant recitation. His hands trembled as he traced a line with his finger, lips moving. "Sam!" I hissed. "What the hell are you doing?" He looked up and I froze. His face was pale, sweat slicking his forehead. His eyes were wide, terrified. "It's different," he whispered. "The book, it changed." I slid off my cot and crossed to him. He shoved the manual toward me, jabbing a finger at the page. Rule 5. It had always read, "Remember, you are already dead. Every breath you take is borrowed time in service to God." But now the words were twisted, the ink warped as if burned into the page. "Remember, you are already dead. Every breath belongs to Malachi." My chest went cold. "This isn't real. It's a trick." Sam's voice broke, high and thin. "No, Marcus, I swear it wasn't here before. Look at it. It wasn't here." His eyes darted around the room as though the walls themselves were closing in. His voice rose, frantic. "If this is true, then we've never been serving God at all. We've been— Sam, stop!" But it was too late. He read the words aloud. "Every breath belongs to Malachi." The candle guttered out, plunging the room into darkness. A chill swept through the dormitory, sharp as knives. My ears filled with a sound like chains dragging over stone. Sam froze, his mouth still open, eyes wide with terror. Then his body jerked violently, as if invisible hands had seized him. "Sam!" I grabbed him, but his skin burned under my palms, heat radiating like fire from within. His back arched, his lips moving, though no words came. His veins darkened, black lines spreading beneath his skin like ink in water. Then the voice came, not Sam's, low, resonant, vibrating in my chest. "At last." A vessel. I staggered back as Sam's eyes rolled white. His body convulsed, limbs snapping into unnatural angles. He rose from the bunk without moving his legs, his head lolling, jaw unhinged in a grotesque smile. David and Father Torres burst through the door, weapons in hand. David's eyes widened at the sight of Sam, now towering in the flicker of torchlight, his body twisted by something not human. "Don't say his name," Torres barked. "Sam." No, the thing inside him laughed. The sound cracked the air, shattering glass in the lanterns. "You carved the rules in my chains. Every death, every prayer, every drop of blood. Mine." Torres raised his crucifix, but the thing swatted it aside with a sweep of its arm. David lunged, blade flashing, but was thrown back into the wall, his breath leaving in a grunt. I was the only one left standing. Sam's body lurched toward me, eyes blazing with black fire. His voice was layered now, his own mixed with something deeper. "Marcus Hale, you've always doubted. That makes you mine." I gripped the axe, hands slick with sweat. My heart hammered. This wasn't Sam anymore. He was gone. With a roar, I swung. The blade split through his chest, light flaring from the runes. For a moment, I thought it was enough, but Sam smiled as the axe cleaved him. His blood sprayed across the stone, sizzling, and in that last instant, his voice slipped through, weak, desperate. "Don't let it out." Then his body collapsed, smoke hissing from the wound, his chest caving inward as though something had been ripped out. The silence that followed was deafening. David pulled himself to his feet, his eyes wet with fury and grief. Torres stood rigid, his lips moving in silent prayer, though I doubted it was to God. I dropped the axe. My arms shook, my stomach twisting. I couldn't breathe. Sam was gone. Another brother lost, not to disobedience but to the truth itself. The rules weren't protection, they weren't warnings, they were Malachi's chains, and one of them had just snapped. The Vatican buried Sam just like the others, quietly, without words, without memory. By dawn, his bunk was empty, his name erased from the rosters as if he had never existed. But his screams still lived in my ears, his blood was still on my hands, and the book, the corrupted Rule 5, burned in my thoughts. Every breath belongs to Malachi. That night, Torres summoned us, what remained of us. We were led deeper than I had ever been before. Past the barracks, past the reliquaries, down stairwells cut into black stone so ancient it felt older than Rome itself. The air grew colder with every step, damp with centuries of rot. Torches lined the walls, their flames weak, as though even fire was afraid to burn here. Finally, we reached a vast chamber carved into the earth. Symbols glowed faintly on the floor, spirals etched into stone, each line pulsing like veins under skin. At the center stood Cardinal Silvano Bianchi, robe scarlet, face pale in the torchlight. Behind him, priests and men in black suits circled the room, their voices rising in low chants. The air thrummed. I knew what this was. A ritual. David stood tall beside me, his burned hand clenched tight, his eyes fixed forward with devotion. Julian was gone. Sam was gone. Only we remained. Torres stopped us at the threshold. His face was hard, unreadable. For a moment, his eyes flicked to mine, and I thought I saw something, fear. Then it was gone. "Step forward," Bianchi commanded. We obeyed. The chants grew louder. The symbols on the floor flared with crimson light. The ground trembled underfoot, and then the sound came. Chains, dragging, scraping, rattling against stone. The same sound Julian had whispered before he died. The same sound I'd heard in my dreams. Bianchi raised his arms. "The locks are breaking. The vessel is ready." The floor split. A fissure tore open at the center of the chamber, light spilling from it, not holy light, but something darker, thicker, like molten shadow. From within rose a shape too vast to comprehend, wings folded like knives, eyes burning coals in a skull that wasn't human. Malachi. His presence crushed the air, forcing me to my knees. My chest heaved, my vision swam, every bone in my body screaming to shatter. The covenant priests fell prostrate, chanting louder, their voices frenzied with devotion. David didn't kneel. He stood tall, face lifted, eyes wet with faith. "This is God's will," he whispered. "No," I hissed, forcing myself upright. "This is a prison break." David turned, fury blazing in his eyes. "You've doubted from the beginning, Marcus. Doubt is death. Obedience is life." He drew his blade, raising it high. Torres barked, "David, stop!" But he didn't. He lunged at me, his faith burning hotter than any anger. I raised the axe, steel clashing against steel, sparks flying. His strength was wild, desperate, fueled by blind belief. "Every breath belongs to him," David roared. "Then breathe your last," I snarled. The fight was brutal, close, steel on steel, each strike ringing in the chamber like another toll of the bells. His blade carved my arm, blood spilling hot, but I swung the axe low, hooking his leg. He stumbled. Malachi's laughter filled the chamber, deep and resonant, rattling the walls. "Fight, little chains! Break for me!" David surged again, but this time his swing was wild. I dodged, brought the axe down. It cleaved through his shoulder, splitting bone. He dropped, blood spraying the symbols, soaking the lines in crimson. The ground shook. The fissure widened. Malachi's form rose higher, wings spreading, shadows swallowing the chamber. David lay gasping at my feet, his eyes still burning with fanatical faith. "Obey the rules," he whispered, blood bubbling at his lips. "Obey." Then he was gone. The chants reached crescendo. The priests screamed praises, their voices breaking, bodies trembling as Malachi's power poured into the room. Torres stood frozen, his face pale, sweat dripping down his brow. Then, slowly, he stepped to my side, his voice barely a whisper. "The rules were never for us," he said. "They were his chains, and they're breaking." Malachi's wings unfurled fully, scraping the chamber walls. His gaze fell upon me, black fire burning in his eyes, and for the first time, the voice I'd only heard in whispers spoke my name. "Marcus Hale." The sound nearly tore me apart. "I've been waiting for you." Malachi's wings filled the chamber, scraping stone, showering dust. His body was smoke and fire stitched together by chains that cracked and snapped with every movement. The ground buckled beneath his weight, though he was more shadow than flesh. The priests screamed in ecstasy, their voices shrill and cracked. Cardinal Bianchi fell to his knees, hands raised. At last, the Lord of Chains walks free. The demon's laughter rolled through the chamber, deeper than thunder. Every breath of it scalded my lungs. My axe felt like a toy in my hands. Father Torres stood rigid beside me, crucifix trembling in his grip. His lips moved in a prayer I couldn't hear over the roar. His eyes, for the first time, showed fear. Malachi's gaze burned into me. Black fire seared my bones. You, Marcus Hale, doubter, breaker, you are mine. The weight of his voice crushed me to the floor. My arms buckled. My ribs screamed. I tried to rise, but my body wouldn't obey. Chains lashed from the fissure, wrapping around the altar, dragging stone into the abyss. One snapped toward me, curling like a serpent. I barely rolled aside, the metal gouging a trench in the floor where I had been. David's blood still glistened on the sigils, fueling the ritual. The priests wailed their chants louder, their bodies trembling with frenzy. I forced myself up, gasping. My mind screamed the words of Rule 5. Remember, you are already dead. Every breath you take is borrowed time in service to God. I had lived by that for 12 years, believed it, obeyed it, but Sam's manual burned in my memory. The corrupted line, every breath belongs to Malachi. That's when it hit me. The rule wasn't protection, it was surrender, submission dressed as survival. If I accepted it, if I kept believing I was already dead, then Malachi owned me, owned all of us, and I wasn't dead, not yet. I clenched my bleeding arm, blood dripping onto the stone. The fissure pulsed at the sight of it, hungry. But this time, I didn't recoil. I leaned into it. I am not dead, I spat, my voice breaking under the weight of his gaze. My breath is mine. Malachi's laughter cut short. His head snapped toward me, flames in his eyes flaring. I staggered forward, dragging the axe. My blood smeared the sigils, rewriting them, twisting their meaning. My will poured into the stone, fighting the chains that had cracked. Torres's voice rose beside me, raw and hoarse. Yes, defy him. The chains bend to faith, not to fear. The chamber screamed. Stone split, torches blew out. The fissure bucked and writhed. Malachi howled, a sound that shattered bone. Priests collapsing in heaps, blood leaking from their ears. I raised the axe high, my body shaking with fire. Light burst from its runes, brighter than I had ever seen, fed by my blood and defiance. This rule dies with me, I roared. I brought the axe down. It cleaved into the floor, splitting the central sigil wide. My blood surged into the crack, igniting it. Chains erupted from the fissure, not breaking but reforging, white-hot searing, wrapping around Malachi's limbs, wings, throat. He thrashed, bellowing. His shadow filled the chamber with fire, but the chains tightened, dragging him down inch by inch. No! He thundered, voice cracking mountains. You are mine! I screamed back, every muscle tearing. I am not dead! With one final pull, the chains snapped taut. Malachi was ripped downward, his form collapsing into smoke and flame, vanishing into the abyss. The fissure slammed shut. The chamber went still. Silence. The priests lay dead. Bianchi was gone. Whether crushed or fled, I didn't know. Torres knelt beside me, blood running down his face, his crucifix shattered. His chest heaved, and for the first time he smiled. You broke the rule, he rasped, and saved us all. Then his body slumped, lifeless. I was alone. The axe lay beside me, dim now, the runes dull. My blood stained the sigils, dried into the cracks of the stone. My hands shook as I pushed myself up, lungs burning with every breath, every breath. I staggered from the chamber, up through the dark corridors, into the night above. Rome's bells rang in the distance, but this time I didn't cover my ears. I was alive. But when I closed my eyes, I still heard him, a whisper in the dark, soft, patient, endless. You broke the rule. Now you are mine.